Today we're doing top 5 mirrorless cameras that shoot 4K under £600.
You like la 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 la.
Okay, so today is a little bit of a weird one. I am currently sort of in transit. I'm going away in a couple of days on a shoot, and then I'm sort of away from home for the next week or so without the usual means of making videos sort of in my house in sort of controlled environments. So today is just going to be a bit of a random one, but it's a subject that I've wanted to talk about for a little while. This might be the same for some of you. I'm always the friend, like the techie, geeky friend who a lot of my mates go to when they're asking about, oh, what gear should I get? Not everyone, because I have people who I go to and ask those questions. But I have people sometimes come to me and say, you know, I'm looking for a camera. I don't want to spend more than £1,000 or more than £500. And, you know, what should I get? And they're asking the right guy, because at night on my own, I spend hours just browsing cameras that I have no intention of buying, or cameras that I aspire to one day buying at some point. You know, things like Fujifilm cameras that I find really interesting, but I have no particular need for. I currently shoot on a Sony a7C. I've got videos on that up in this playlist here. But yeah, I'm always looking at what is an alternative option and, you know, what is the best value camera under like X amount of money. So today I would like to give you the first list in what might be a sporadically recurring series of top 5 cameras under X amount. Today we're doing top 5 mirrorless cameras that shoot 4K under £600. I'm also shooting this in S-Log3 at the moment, and I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I don't mind S-Log3, but this is weird. I don't have my light here. I'm not controlling stuff. This is not what I normally deal with. And yeah, so the criteria for this one is they need to shoot at least 4K, 24p, 25p, 30p, whatever, just baseline 4K, with no additional crop, and 1080p with some increased frame rates. That would be a nice touch. And yes, we're looking at mainly, you know, mirrorless photo video cameras with a bit more emphasis on the video side of things. The first on the list is the Fujifilm X-T30. And you can buy this secondhand at the moment from an approved reseller, so not via eBay or anything. You can buy that right now for £589. The X-T30 is a pretty compelling camera, and it compares with things like the Sony a6400, a6300, that sort of crop sensor, mirrorless, but still pretty beefy performance. One of the biggest drawbacks of the camera is it doesn't have a flip screen, which I'm someone who loves a flip screen. I'm on the A7C, as I mentioned before. Got a flip screen, super simple for just framing things up when you're not where you normally are. Like, you don't always have a monitor with you. I always use this Feel World monitor on my A6300, but you know, it's an extra cumbersome bit of kit that you don't always want to be using. So that is something to think about. But the X-T30 it's not really like a Fuji X-T3. Like the X-T3 was a much beefier camera, like the X-T4 that came after it. But it's like a lot of that Fuji goodness in a more affordable and a little bit more compact package. It'll do 100 frames a second in PAL and 120 frames per second in NTSC in 1080p, and then it'll do 4K up to 30 frames a second. So yeah, that is number 1 on the list. Next on the list, we have my beloved Sony a6300, which is back here. I bought this a6300, just the body alone, in good condition from mpb.com in the UK, which they also have US sites. I'll drop a link down below. And I bought this for, I think, £430 or £440. But the cheapest one that they have going at the moment on mpb.com is £539. And this has a very comparable feature set to the X-T30 that we just mentioned before. It's crop sensor. It will do 1080p up to 100 frames a second in PAL, 120 in NTSC, 4K up to 30 frames a second, and the 4K is 100 megabytes a second. It's very, very good. Fully flexible picture profiles, has things like S-Log in there. The main drawbacks that you'll be very aware of are overheating, it is a problem, and absolutely shit battery life. So if you are gonna run it, I tend to put a power bank in this power bank holder on a small rig cage, and then I plug this dummy battery into a power bank so it runs. It will in theory run for as long as you want, but overheating is an issue you will run into. There will likely never be a perfect camera, but if you can find a good enough camera and you can figure out a little workaround for its drawbacks, then you're on your way. I would never shoot with this handheld personally, only on a gimbal or on tripods. But yes, very good. Mic inputs, the works, everything you need to get started. Next on our list, number 3, is another one from Fuji. It is the Fujifilm X-H1. Up until like the X-T3, Fuji didn't really have a compelling video option. Like the X-T1 and the X-T2 were like interchangeable lens, their flagship photography cameras, but the X-H1 was their first proper effort to make a decent video-oriented mirrorless camera. It would shoot 4K up to 30p, and then it also had built-in IBIS and 1080p slow motion. This is actually quite good, and at one point when I was previously a Canon shooter and I was considering other brands, it was the main thing drawing me towards something like a Fuji. I've yet to use this camera, but I'm really trying to get my hands on it at the moment, just to sort of weigh it up and see how good of an option it is. And I'd love to do a comparison video between, say, that and the X-T30. And the main reason for this is because the X-T30, as I mentioned before, is £589, and the Fuji X-H1 is £619. So there's only actually a, do the maths, George, there's a £30 difference between these cameras. Both have that unique Fujifilm look in their images, similar feature set, so I'd like to get my hands on both and see which one is the best option for video. One of the main drawbacks with the X-H1 is that the high frame rate video is actually not with audio recorded. Similar to shooting in Sony S&Q modes, you get the footage back and it's already slowed down. This is good if you're just shooting like purposefully slowed down footage, but it means you can't really decide like, oh, I'll just shoot 100 FPS and then decide later if I slow it down and we'll still get the audio. It's a bit more of a commitment. You have to know that this is an action shot right now, we want some slow motion, and audio doesn't really matter. Next up on our list in position number 4 is another one from Sony, and it is the original low light king. It is the Sony A7S. You can get the Sony A7S now in all of its low light 4K glory for £524. If you said in 2014, 2015, you could get an A7S for under 600 quid, you'd be absolutely insane. And back then I was shooting on a Canon 6D, which didn't even have autofocus in video, 1080p at 25 FPS. It was an absolute like shit show personally. But now that you can get the A7S for less than some brand new crop sensor cameras that don't shoot insane low light, it's a great deal. Obviously the A7S had its problems like other Sony cameras, like when they first started to really push their mirrorless cameras, they had these insane spec sheets, but then the hardware was still having to sort of catch up. So there's big problems with overheating again, and also the battery life was still quite shoddy. This was long before the A7 III when the batteries were updated and battery life improved massively. You're still dealing like with those old little tiny Sony batteries and you're having to just churn through loads of them. I used to shoot with Sony A7Ss and A7S2s with an agency in Manchester, and we literally just churned through batteries while recording podcasts. I think eventually we just landed on using dummy batteries, made everything a lot easier. Now the Sony A7S option that I found that is £524 is well used, and then if you're looking for one in good condition, you're looking at £674. But again, you're getting slow-mo in 1080p and you are getting 4K recording with insane low light performance for under 600 quid, or if you went for the better condition one that's in good, then it's just under 700 quid for £674. That's insane. That's insane. If I needed a new full frame camera, I would get it. that's sort of why I'm making this video, and like just because I'm always looking at different options and I'm always looking at like what would I get right now. I wish I could get my hands on all 5 of these right now to like give you guys a load of examples. Hopefully at some point in the future we can do those sort of videos. That would be awesome to to be able to show you guys the sort of kit you can get that's quite low cost and get yourself set up for making kick-ass vids. Number 5 on my list, the last on the list. I've nearly bought this camera so many times and I ended up buying its bigger brother when it ultimately came out. And this is the Panasonic GH4, one of the original like cinematic mirrorless video cameras. The GH4 does 4K, absolutely stunning images, and can have log, but it had to be updated afterwards. With this camera, you are getting 4K. It's a micro 4/3 size sensor, which is significantly smaller than a full frame sensor, and then a little bit smaller than an APS-C size sensor. With the camera in HD, you're getting up to 60 frames a second, so not like crazy slow-mo, but this camera did come out like, when did this camera come out? Sorry, man looks up information. May 2014. It came out, it came out in May 2014. I was a farmhand in Australia back then. So yeah, it's a super old bit of kit, but at the same time, like, you're getting 4K, slow-mo 1080, and an insane lineup of lenses with micro 4/3 that you can attach speed boosted Canon lenses to, with the amount of money you're saving on this thing, because you can get this camera for £409 in 2021. £409 for a 4K flip screen cinematic beast. Primarily if you're shooting outdoors and that sort of thing, but you could shoot with this, make an outdoors documentary, not tell anyone what you shot it on, and they would believe you were shooting something that was 2020 release. One of the biggest drawbacks for me personally with the GH4, and same thing I have with the GH5, is the autofocus. It doesn't really exist. It's there, but Panasonic are just using a completely different system that nobody else is asking for, and also the low light performance and ISO performance is pretty shocking. That £409 price tag for the GH4 is for a GH4 in good condition. Then you can get one in excellent condition for £454. Right, so that is it for the list today. I hope this has been helpful for you in some sort of way. I kind of just want to push people away from buying in cash brand new cameras with money that they don't really have, because they think I need 4K 120p, or I need, you know, I don't know, like 20 frames a second burst shooting photography. A lot of the times you don't. Some of the best people I know locally in the UK shoot on a few years old cameras with significant drawbacks, and they are still putting out more content than most people I know, and at a really high level of performance. So I would not for a second think that you need a Sony a7S III, or you need an FX3, or you need a Canon C70 to get started making awesome videos, or even doing professional client work. Like a couple of years ago when I started doing my client work full time, I was shooting on a Canon 6D Mark II with 3 banged up, well-used prime lenses. Trust me, nobody cares. As long as you can deliver high quality content and be consistent with it, the gear you're using doesn't really matter at the end of the day. So, from me and my Frankenstein rig A6300, have a great day. I'll see you in the next video. If there are any additional cameras you'd like me to look at in the future and you want me to get my hands on, drop them in the comments below and I will look into sourcing them among my sort of Fujifilm adventure, because I really want to get my hands on some Fujis and try out shooting some different sort of stuff.